would live therein or in the special Venerian rooms of the vessel as long as the journey should endure. For the atmosphere of Venus is more than twice as dense as ours, is practically saturated with water vapor, carries an extremely high concentration of carbon dioxide, and in their suits and rooms is held at a temperature of 110 degrees Fahrenheit. The lenses of their helmets were of heavy, yellowish-red composition, protecting their dead-white skins and red eyes from all actinic rays. For the Venerian lives upon the bottom of an everlasting sea of fog, and his thin epidermis, utterly without pigmentation, burns and blisters as frightfully at the least exposure to actinic light as does ours at the touch of a red-hot iron. Out in space at last, cruising idly with the acceleration set at a point bearable for the Martians, Westfall called the meeting to order and outlined the situation facing them. Brandon then handed around folios of papers, upon which the Venerians turned the invisible infrared beams of the illuminators upon their helmets, thus flooding them with the light to which their retinas were most responsive. "Here's the data," Brandon began. "As you see from Sheet 1, we can already draw any amount of power we shall need from cosmic radiation alone." "Perpetual motion! Ridiculous!" snapped from the sending disk upon the helmet of the Master of Mechanism. "Not at all, Aminar," put in his fellow Venerian. "Any more than a turbo-generator at the foot of a waterfall is perpetual motion. Those radiations originate we know not where, probably as a result of intra-atomic reactions. The fields of force of our hosts merely intercept these radiations, as a water-driven turbine intercepts the water. We merely use a portion of their energy before permitting them to go on, to we know not what end. Truly, you have made a notable achievement in science, Tellurian friends, and we congratulate you upon its accomplishment. Please proceed." Upon the following sheets are described the forces employed by the Jovians, as we shall call them until we find out who or what they really are. We will discuss these forces later. For each force we have already calculated a screen, and we have also calculated various other forces of our own, with which we hope to arm ourselves before we reach Ganymede. The problems facing us are complex, since there are some 9,000 force bands of the order in which we are working, each differing from all the others as much as torque differs from tension, or as much as red differs from green. Therefore, we have appealed to you for help, knowing that we could do but little alone. Alcantro and Fidanzo will supervise the construction of the generators of the various fields from these calculations. Dol Kinor will correlate power and electricity to and with the fields. Westfall and I will help work out the theoretical difficulties as they arise. Pyraz Aminar, who can devise and build a machine to perform any conceivable mechanical task, will help us all in the many mechanical difficulties we shall certainly encounter. Discussion of any point is now in order." Step by step and equation after equation the calculations and plans were gone over, until every detail was clear in each mind. Then the men bent to their tasks, behind them not only the extraordinarily complete facilities of that gigantic workshop which was the Sirius, but also the full power of the detachment of police, the very cream of the young manhood of the planet. Week after toilsome week, the unremitting labor went on, and little by little the massive cruiser of the void became endowed with an offensive and defensive armament incredible. An armament conceived in the fertile and daring brain of a sheer genius, guided only by the knowledge that such things were already in existence somewhere, reduced to working theory by a precise mathematical logician, translated into fields of force by the greatest known experts, powered by the indefatigable efforts of an electrical wizard, made possible by the artful mechanical devices of the greatest inventor that 3 worlds had ever known. Thus it was that they approached Ganymede, ready, with blanketing screens full out, save for one narrow working band, and with a keen-eyed observer at every plate. When even the hypercritical Westfall was convinced that their preparations were as complete as they could be made with the limited information at hand, Brandon directed a beam upon the satellite and tapped off a brief message. "Stevens Ganymede. Will arrive in about 10 hours. Direct carrier beam toward sun. We can detect it, and will follow it to wherever you are, Sirius." "IPV Sirius," came the reply. "Everything here, all X. Glad to see you. Thanks, Newton and Stevens." Brandon, at the controls, scanning his screens narrowly, dropped the vessel down to within a mile or two of the point of origin of Stevens' carrier beam without incident, then spoke to Westfall at his side with a grin. "Nice layout the kids got down there, Quince. It's too bad. Don't look like we're going to get any action for our money at all. It's a shame, too. What's the use of wasting it, now that we've got it all made?" "We are not done yet," cautioned Westfall, and even as he spoke an alarm bell burst into strident clamor. One of their far-flung detector screens was telling the world that it had encountered a dangerous frequency. The new ultralights flared instantly along the line automatically laid down by the detector, and upon the closely ruled micrometer screen of Brandon's desk there glowed in natural color the image of a globular spaceship, approaching them with terrific speed. "Men all stationed, of course, Crown." "Stationed and ready." Crowninshield, phones at his ears and microphone at his lips, was staring intently into his own plate. "Kinda think I'll do most of it from here, but you can't always tell. If they get inside my guard, you all know what to do." "All X." Expecting another such hollow victory as the other Hexan vessel had won over the defenseless Arcturus, the small stranger flashed nearer and nearer that huge and featureless football of armor steel. Within range, she launched her flaming plane of energy, but this time that Jovian sheet of force did not encounter unprotected and non-resisting steel. Upon the outer ray screen, flaming white into incandescent defense, the furious bolt spent itself, and in the instant of the launching of the searing blade of flame, Brandon had gone into action. Switch after switch drove home, and one after another those frightful fields of force, those products of the mightiest minds of 3 planets, were hurled out against the tiny Jovian sphere. Driven as they were by the millions upon millions of horsepower stored in the accumulators of the Sirius, they formed a coruscating spherical shell of intolerable energy all around the enemy vessel. But even their prodigious force was held at bay by the powerful defensive screens of the smaller spaceship. But attack the Jovian could not, every resource at her command being necessary to fend off the terrific counterattack of her intended prey as she turned in flight. Small and agile as she was, the enormous mass of the Sirius precluded any possibility of maneuvering with the Jovian, but Brandon had no intention of maneuvering. Rapid as the motions of the stranger were, and frantic as was her dodging, the terrific forces of the tractor beams of the interplanetary vessel held her in an unbreakable grip, and although she dragged the massive Sirius hither and thither, she could not escape. Mused Brandon. "We seem to be getting nowhere fast. How much power are we using, Mac, and how much we got coming in?" "Output 85,000 kilofrancs," replied MacDonald, the first assistant. "Intake 49,000. "Not so good. Can't hold out forever at that rate. Shove out the receptor screens to the limit and drive 'em. They figure a top of 60,000, but we ought to pick up a little extra from that blaze out there. Drive 'em full out or up to 65, whichever comes first. Can't seem to crush his screens, so I guess we'll have to try something else." And a thoughtful expression came over his face as he slowly extended his hand toward another switch, with a questioning glance at Westfall. "Better not do that yet, Norman. Use that only as a last resort, after everything else has failed." "Yeah, I'm scared to death of trying it, and it isn't necessary yet. He must have an open slit somewhere to work through, just as we have. I'll feel around for it a while." "Is there any way of heterodyning the new visiray upon the exploring frequency?" Never thought of that. It would be nice, too. I think we can do it, too. Watch 'em, Quince, and holler if they start